The clock struck 7 p.m. as Victor, the ruthless CEO, barked orders at Eliana, his maid, belittling her in front of his guests. She gripped the edges of her apron, tears stinging her eyes, while a hidden figure behind the ornate door listened intently. Hours later, Victor's world unraveled when his estranged daughter, the one he abandoned for power, stepped into the room, her gaze filled with fury and betrayal. "You don't deserve her," she declared, shattering his facade of control. "My name is Eliana, and today the truth will break the chains of silence." I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me as I stood in the lavish living room, the air thick with tension and unspoken truths. The sound of my heart raced in my ears, drowning out the echoes of my thoughts. I wanted to scream, to fight back against the humiliation Thomas had inflicted upon me, but I remained frozen, gripping the edge of the polished wooden table as if it were my only anchor in a storm. The memory of his disdainful laughter hung in the air like a heavy fog, reminding me of the countless times I had been belittled in my role as his maid. The moment felt surreal, my mind racing with the consequences of what had just transpired. I had poured my heart and soul into this job, hoping to provide a better life for my family, only to be met with scorn. Just a few hours earlier, I had arrived at the Grand Estate, a place filled with opulence yet devoid of warmth. I recalled my mother, Grace, her words of encouragement ringing in my ears as I navigated the challenges of my work. "Eliana, you are stronger than you think. No one has the right to make you feel less than you are." But that strength felt like a distant memory now. Thomas's voice cut through my reverie as he barked orders, oblivious to my silent suffering. I could feel his eyes on me like a predator sizing up its prey, and I struggled to maintain my composure. The way he treated me, as if I were less than human, had become a grim routine. But today felt different. Today, in this moment of vulnerability, I sensed a shift. I glanced toward the door, half expecting to see Liam burst in, his youthful energy a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. Little did I know, my brother was indeed watching from a hidden corner, his smartphone poised to capture the moment that would change everything. I had always wanted to protect him from the harsh realities of life, yet here he was, an unwitting witness to my degradation. The thought of Liam seeing me humiliated filled me with an unexpected surge of anger. How could Thomas treat me this way in front of my brother? With a deep breath, I forced myself to straighten up, determined not to let him see my weakness. I focused on the task at hand, straightening the cushions on the sofa, my hands moving mechanically as if I were merely a part of the furniture. I could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck, but I steeled my heart against it. If I showed weakness now, it would only empower him further. I recalled Grace's words, and I vowed silently to myself that I wouldn't be broken today. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as I caught a glimpse of Liam's face peering around the corner. His eyes were wide with disbelief, and I could see the conflict waging within him. Would he choose to stand by my side or remain silent in the face of injustice? My heart ached at the thought of him grappling with such a heavy decision. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him that it would be okay, but the words seemed to die in my throat. I turned back to Thomas, who continued to bark orders and mock me with every syllable. "Can't you do anything right?" he sneered, his words cutting deeper than any knife. The heat of humiliation washed over me once again, and for a moment I let my mask slip. I looked at him, fury mixing with fear. How could someone so privileged be so blind to the suffering of others? Then I saw Liam take a step forward, his phone still recording, capturing not just the moment, but the essence of my struggle. My heart raced as I realized that he had chosen to bear witness, to document the truth that lay beneath the surface of our lives. The thought of being exposed both terrified and exhilarated me. If he shared the video, perhaps it would awaken the world to the reality of my situation. It could lead to change, not just for me, but for others like me who suffered in silence. "Liam, don't," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I sent him a pleading look. I wasn't sure if he could hear me over Thomas's tirade, but I hoped my eyes conveyed the gravity of my request. I wanted to protect him from the fallout, from the storm that would surely follow if I chose to fight back against our employer. Yet, as I watched him stand resolute, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. This moment, this intersection of our lives, was an awakening. I could see in his expression that he understood. He was ready to fight for me, and in that shared understanding, I found my own strength. Thomas, oblivious to our silent exchange, continued his verbal assault, but the edges of my fear began to blur. Perhaps it was time for me to reclaim my dignity. I took a deep breath, inhaling the courage that had eluded me for so long. "I am not less than you, Thomas," I finally said, my voice steady and resolute. "You may have wealth, but that does not grant you the right to treat me like this." For the first time, I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, a momentary crack in his facade of power. The room went quiet, as if the universe held its breath, waiting for his response. I felt the electricity of the moment surge through me, a wave of empowerment that had been building within. Whatever happened next, I knew I had to stand my ground. In that instant, I was not just a maid, I was Eliana, and I was ready to fight for my voice. In the silence that followed, Thomas's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and annoyance flickering across his face. He seemed to gauge the atmosphere, sensing the tension hanging heavy in the air. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat echoing the words I had nearly shouted. My thoughts raced as I contemplated the consequences of my defiance. Would Thomas retaliate? Would this only make things worse for my family? Yet there was something liberating about speaking my truth, even if it came with risks. Liam, still hidden behind the large potted plant in the corner, must have sensed the gravity of the moment. I glanced at him, and our eyes locked for a heartbeat that felt eternal. I could see the conflict etched on his young face. He was grappling with the enormity of what he had witnessed. I silently begged him to understand that I was fighting not just for myself, but for every underappreciated worker who had faced humiliation in silence. The weight of my struggle felt amplified in that fleeting moment, as if I were carrying the hopes of others who had suffered in similar situations. Thomas cleared his throat, his voice a low growl as he finally spoke. "You think this is some sort of game, Eliana? You need to remember your place." His words dripped with disdain, but I refused to let them cut me down. The humiliation of being belittled was familiar, but my resolve was stronger now, fueled by the silent witness in the room. I could no longer allow him to dictate my worth. "I do remember my place, Mr. Johnson," I responded, my voice steady despite the tremor of adrenaline coursing through me. "And it's not beneath your foot." A flash of anger crossed his features, but I detected a hint of uncertainty lurking beneath. Perhaps he was beginning to realize that the power dynamic could shift. This wasn't just about the hierarchy of employer and employee. It was about respect and dignity. The imbalance he enjoyed was no longer secure, and I could see the stirrings of doubt in his eyes. I took a step forward, emboldened by the moment, aware that Liam was watching, absorbing every word. "I may be your maid, but I am also a person with feelings and dreams. You can't just trample over that because you hold a title." For a moment, the air crackled with tension. Thomas's face turned a shade of crimson, perhaps from rage or embarrassment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he fought to regain control of the situation. But I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The opulent room, once a gilded cage of submission, felt like a stage where I could reclaim my narrative. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was standing up for everyone who had been silenced, including Liam, who had grown up watching this dynamic unfold. Suddenly, the sharp click of a camera shutter echoed through the room, breaking the tension. I turned my head slightly to see Liam, his phone raised, capturing the moment, capturing my fight. I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and fear for him. "Liam, no," I called out, the protective instinct kicking in. I didn't want him to suffer consequences from my actions, yet I couldn't deny that his presence lent weight to my stance. Thomas glared at Liam, his anger now fully directed at my brother. "What do you think you're doing, boy? This is none of your business." The sudden shift in focus shocked me. I hadn't anticipated that my brother's involvement would provoke Thomas's fury so easily. But Liam stood his ground, his youthful courage shining through. "It is my business when you treat my sister like that," he replied defiantly. My heart swelled with affection for Liam. He had always been my little hero, and now he was standing up for me in a way I never expected. Yet I feared for him. Would this backlash come crashing down on us both? I felt a pang of guilt for dragging him into this conflict, but I also knew it was essential for our future. We needed to challenge the status quo, to demonstrate that exploitation would not be tolerated in our home, no matter how lavish it appeared. Thomas's gaze darted between us, his mind racing as he weighed his options. It was as if he was searching for a way to reassert his dominance, but he was losing control of the narrative. "You think this little stunt is going to change anything?" he sneered, but his bravado was unconvincing. I could see a flicker of doubt, a crack in his armor, and I resolved to push through that hesitation. "It already has," I asserted, my voice stronger than I felt. "You're losing your grip." With each passing moment, it became clear that I had shifted the power dynamics, even if only slightly. Thomas's bravado was beginning to falter under the weight of our unity. The fear of being exposed was a palpable force, and I sensed he was caught between his desire to assert control and the reality that we were no longer willing to accept the treatment he had dished out for so long. As I stood there, heart racing, I felt a surge of determination. I was not just fighting for myself or even for Liam, I was fighting for every person who had ever felt small in the face of someone else's power. I turned my gaze back to Thomas, who was visibly struggling to compose himself. "You might think you have the upper hand now, but it won't last forever. People are waking up to how they are treated, and I refuse to be a part of that silence anymore." The moment hung in the air, charged with possibility, as I awaited his response. In my heart, I knew that whatever happened next would not only shape our lives, but also challenge the status quo of a world that had often overlooked the strength found in the most unexpected places. The tide was turning, and together, Liam and I would not only be seen, we would be heard. As the tension hung between us, I felt a newfound sense of hope for our future. A glimmer of light breaking through the suffocating darkness of oppression. It was time for change, and we were ready to lead the charge. If you enjoyed this story and want to follow Eliana's journey toward justice and empowerment, subscribe for more gripping tales of courage and resilience. The following day, I arrived at work with a heaviness in my heart, the memory of yesterday's humiliation fresh in my mind. I could still hear the mocking laughter echoing around me, the way Thomas's voice dripped with scorn as he belittled my every effort. Yet beneath that weight, an ember of defiance flickered within me. I could no longer simply accept the roles assigned to us, nor could I allow fear to dictate my actions any longer. As I pushed open the grand doors of the estate, I resolved to face Thomas with unwavering strength, even if my hands trembled slightly at my sides. Liam had promised to keep the video safe, a piece of evidence that encapsulated the truth I had long suffered in silence. I still wasn't sure how to feel about that moment of betrayal, but I knew he had witnessed something that could no longer be overlooked. My little brother's innocence was both a comfort and a source of worry. He should never have had to see me like that. I could hear the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the faint hum of a vacuum cleaning the expansive marble floors, and I steeled myself to face whatever awaited me today. When I stepped into the kitchen, Thomas was already there, his presence dominating the space. He was checking his phone, oblivious to the chaos that lingered in the air between us. The tension was palpable, and it felt as though I were walking on eggshells, every step measured and cautious. I started the morning routine, making coffee and preparing breakfast, doing my best to focus on the tasks at hand, but his gaze pierced through me, heavy and accusing, and I could sense his expectation for me to falter. "You missed a spot," he barked suddenly, pointing to a corner of the counter. My heart raced, but I swallowed my pride, reminding myself of the bigger picture. I had a family to support and dreams that reached beyond these walls, however confining they felt. "Yes, sir," I replied, taking a deep breath. "I'll clean it now." I couldn't afford to fight every battle. Some days, mere survival felt like a victory. As I scrubbed the surface, I could feel Thomas's eyes boring into me, his disdain palpable. It was a reminder that in his eyes, I would never be more than a maid, an accessory to his wealth and status. Despite the weight of his judgment, I held on to the resolve I had forged in the wake of Liam's observation. I wouldn't let him reduce me to a shadow of myself. As I finished my chores, I had to remind myself that every act of defiance was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. Grace called later, her voice a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. "How are you holding up, Eliana?" she asked gently. I could hear the worry lacing her words. "I'm managing, Mom," I said, grateful for her unwavering support. "I'm trying to stay focused on what matters." "I wish I could do more," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You deserve respect and kindness, not what he gives you." Her words struck a chord in me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her belief in me. I realized that while I was caught in a cycle of humiliation, I was not alone. Liam's courage gave me strength, and my mother's love fueled my determination. With each passing hour, I could sense a shift in the air. The heaviness that had settled within me began to lift, replaced by the clarity of purpose. As the day wore on, the usual chaos of the household unfolded. I busied myself with my tasks, but I was more aware of the dynamics between Thomas and me. When he snapped at me again later, a small part of me wanted to retaliate, to unleash the pent-up frustration that had been simmering for so long. But I chose another path. "Thomas," I said, my voice steady, though my heart raced, "I'm here to do my job, and I take pride in my work. I hope you can see that." His brow furrowed in surprise, and for the briefest moment, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty flicker across his face. Perhaps he wasn't used to being confronted, especially not by someone he deemed insignificant. But instead of pushing back, he fell into silence, and I felt an unexpected sense of empowerment in that exchange. The tension lingered, and I sensed Liam's support behind the scenes, even if he wasn't physically present. He was my silent ally, waiting for the right moment to act. That evening, as I tidied up after dinner, I overheard Thomas on a call, his voice laced with frustration. It was a rare sight, his mask slipping, revealing the flaws behind the facade of wealth and power. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, knowing that beneath the surface, he was just as vulnerable as anyone else. Later, when I finally retreated to the solitude of my room, I collapsed onto the bed, my chest rising and falling heavily. I reflected on the day's events, the small victories that had felt monumental in the face of adversity. There was something exhilarating about standing my ground, about refusing to be a mere spectator in my own life. I closed my eyes, envisioning a future where I would no longer be defined by someone else's contempt, but by my own resilience and dignity. It was a dream worth fighting for, and I would not let it slip away. The moment I decided to stand up for myself marked a turning point I never anticipated. No longer would I allow Thomas's words to define me. I could feel an empowering fire igniting within me. It was an odd mixture of fear and exhilaration, a palpable tension that made my heart race. I was acutely aware of Liam's presence, the weight of his gaze lingering on me like a silent promise that I wouldn't have to face this alone. I glanced briefly at him, his youthful face etched with concern, and it reminded me of the love that binds our family together. I had spent years shielding him from the ugliness of my work environment, but now he was witnessing the reality of my struggle.
As Thomas continued with his tirade, his tone dripping with condescension, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. His insults, once so powerful and crippling, began to lose their sting. I was tired of feeling like a shadow in his world, a mere extension of his wealth and privilege. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and let the silence hang heavily between us for a moment. The atmosphere thickened, and I sensed that the world had slowed down, just for me. "Enough," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. It felt almost surreal to hear the words leave my lips, but they carried a weight that felt liberating.
I saw the surprise flicker across Thomas's face, a mixture of shock and confusion. The room fell silent, the tension palpable as the implications of my words sank in. "You do not have the right to speak to me like that. I am a person, not just your maid." For a heartbeat, I feared I had overstepped, that I had opened a door I couldn't close. But then I noticed Liam's expression shift from worry to pride. His eyes sparkled with hope, as if he believed in the courage I was finally mustering. The acknowledgement of my worth felt like a ripple in the fabric of our lives, and I couldn't back down now. Thomas chuckled, but it lacked his usual confidence. He tried to regain control, attempting to belittle my outburst. "And what do you think that will change, Eliana? You're just a maid," he sneered, but his words held less power than before. I could feel the room around us shift, as if those who had stood by and watched were finally awakening to the truth of our situation. "You may see me as just a maid, but I am so much more than that. I have dreams and a family that depends on me. I am not here to be humiliated for your amusement," I replied, each word crystal clear in my mind. It felt like a weight lifted, but I knew I had to tread carefully. My heart raced and adrenaline coursed through my veins, propelling me forward. Thomas's expression darkened. I could see the gears turning in his mind as he processed my defiance. He took a step closer, his face contorted with anger, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. Perhaps he realized that his power over me was not as absolute as he had believed. The others in the room, staff who had witnessed countless humiliations, began to murmur amongst themselves. It was a subtle but significant shift. They were no longer passive bystanders, they were engaged, and that made all the difference. Then, amidst the chaos of emotions, I caught a glimpse of Liam again. He was gripping his phone tightly, a mixture of determination and fear on his face. I knew that he was contemplating the repercussions of sharing what he had just witnessed. He had always been my protector, even in ways I hadn't acknowledged. I felt a surge of gratitude toward him. He believed in me, in my strength, even when I doubted myself. In the midst of this confrontation, my mind raced with thoughts of our family. Grace had always been my rock, nurturing my spirit and teaching me the value of self-respect. I wanted her to see me as the brave woman I was becoming, not just the girl who accepted mistreatment because it was easier. I wanted Liam to grow up knowing that standing up for oneself was not just commendable, but necessary. I could sense Thomas wrestling with his pride and the reality that I had just flipped the script. "You think this is going to change anything? I own this house, this company, your livelihood," he spat, but his bluster was losing its edge. "You really think you can just walk away?" "I know I can, and I know I deserve better," I countered, feeling my resolve strengthen with every word. "I won't allow this to continue. If you want to fire me, so be it, but I will not be a part of this cycle of disrespect." For a moment, his bravado faltered. I could see him grappling with the notion of losing control, and I relished it. The power dynamic was shifting, and I was no longer the victim. The room buzzed with a nervous energy, and I felt the weight of many eyes upon us. This was a battle, not just for my dignity, but for the dignity of everyone in that room who had ever been belittled or ignored. Then, just as I thought I had made my point, Thomas took a step back, his face darkening. "Fine," he said, his tone dangerously calm. "You want to quit? Go ahead, but be prepared for the consequences."
The finality in his voice echoed, and I felt a chill run through me. It was a threat, but I was resolute. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to confront it. The weight of his words hung in the air, but I didn't waver. If standing up for myself means facing consequences, then so be it. I choose my dignity over your approval. I took a deep breath, holding on to the strength I had finally found. The journey had begun, and as I turned away from him, I felt Liam's eyes still on me, a beacon of unwavering support. I would not back down, not now, not ever. As I stepped away from Thomas, my heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through my veins. I could sense the tension thickening in the air, each breath I took filled with the weight of my defiance. The plush carpet beneath my feet felt like a soft reminder of how different our worlds were. I was a maid in his extravagant palace, yet in that moment, I had grasped a fragment of power. Turning my back on him was more than just a refusal to accept his ridicule. It was a declaration of my own worth. I could hear the faint rustling of my uniform as I moved, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped the room. The kitchen was my sanctuary, a place filled with the comforting scent of spices and baked goods. In that moment, I needed its warmth. As I entered, I found solace in the rhythmic clang of pots and pans, a familiar melody that soothed my frayed nerves. I busied myself with preparing dinner, letting the tasks at hand distract me from the uncertainty lingering in my heart. Each chop of the vegetables and stir of the sauce felt cathartic, a way to channel the anger that had been bubbling inside me. I imagined the meal would be a feast for my family, a reminder that love could manifest even in the simplest of dishes. Meanwhile, Liam remained in the shadows, grappling with his own whirlwind of emotions. I could picture him, phone in hand, watching the exchange unfold with a mix of disbelief and anger. Would he understand my decision to stand up for myself? Would he be proud or worried about the repercussions? These thoughts plagued me, and I hoped he could see beyond the surface. The strength I was building, the courage it took to challenge authority. I wanted him to learn that respect was not granted, but earned, and sometimes it required a fierce stand against those who sought to undermine it. As the evening approached, I could hear the sounds of Thomas entertaining guests in the grand living room. Their laughter echoed through the halls, a stark reminder of the divide between their world and mine. I wondered if he had brushed off the incident, if he felt even a twinge of guilt for how he treated me. I doubted it. The wealthy often shielded themselves from the consequences of their actions, wrapped in layers of privilege that shielded them from the realities of others' lives. But I was determined to change that, even if it was just in my small corner of the world. When I finally sat down with my family for dinner, I watched Grace serve us all with a smile that radiated warmth and love. She had always been my rock, instilling in me values that transcended our circumstances. "You worked hard today, Eliana," she said, her eyes twinkling with pride. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure if I should spill the events of the day. The last thing I wanted was to worry them or invite more chaos into our lives. But their happiness meant everything to me, and I realized that hiding my struggles wouldn't serve anyone. "Just a tough day at work," I finally said, testing the waters. The truth felt heavy, and part of me wanted to share the entire story, to let them know how I was standing up for myself. But I feared their protective instincts would prompt them to urge me to back down. It was essential that I carve this path for myself. I needed to show Liam that courage could take many forms, that voicing one's truth was paramount even in the face of adversity. Liam looked up from his plate, his brow furrowing slightly. "Are you okay, Ellie? You seem different." His voice was softer, the concern palpable. I nodded, a faint smile gracing my lips, determined to shield him from my internal battles. "Just a little tired, that's all." The fabric of my smile felt stretched, but I had to keep the mask on for now to protect him from the harshness of the world and the reality of our circumstances. But as the night wore on, the tension nagged at me. I felt the weight of my brother's gaze, and it dawned on me that he might have captured more than just a moment of humiliation. The thought of him sharing that video, or worse, someone else finding it, sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't help but imagine the potential fallout, the consequences of my actions rippling through our lives. Would it bring change or only more trouble? Later that night, as we settled into our routines, I found myself in the living room, the dim light casting soft shadows on the walls. I watched as Liam fiddled with his phone, his brows knitted together in concentration. My heart raced. I needed to speak to him before he made any decisions. "Liam, can we talk?" I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. I gestured for him to join me on the couch, hoping to have a moment where I could articulate the mix of emotions swirling in my head. When he sat next to me, I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I know you saw what happened today, and I want you to understand something," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "Standing up for myself is important, but how we handle the aftermath matters too." His expression was serious, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "I don't want you to feel like you have to take sides or that your support for me means exposing our family to more pain." Liam shifted slightly, his gaze dropping to his phone. "But I hate how he treats you, Ellie. You deserve better." His voice trembled with conviction, and I could feel the sincerity in his words. "I just want to help." I placed a hand on his shoulder, the bond between us palpable in that moment. "And you do help, more than you know. Just let me figure this out first, okay?" He nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding passing between us. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Together, we could navigate the treacherous waters ahead, a united front against the injustices we faced. In that quiet moment, I vowed to fight for my dignity and to teach Liam that love and respect should reign, no matter the circumstances. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on, one step at a time. As I lay in bed that night, the echo of our conversation lingered in my mind. The weight of the day settled around me, but instead of despair, I felt a flicker of hope. Change was possible, and together with my family, we would carve out a space where dignity prevailed over humiliation. The power of our unity could challenge the status quo, and I was determined to lead the charge. Every story of resilience counts, and if you have your own tale of standing up against injustice, share it with those around you. Together, we can inspire change. As the days passed, I felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the house. Thomas's usual arrogance seemed to wane, replaced by an awkward tension whenever we crossed paths. I would catch him glancing in my direction, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, as if the weight of his previous actions hung heavily in the air. I no longer felt like the invisible maid in the corner. Rather, I became a presence he could no longer ignore. It was a strange sensation, this newfound visibility, and it filled me with a mix of apprehension and resolve. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of cleaning and organizing, I overheard Thomas on the phone with someone, his voice low but filled with agitation. "I can't believe it. A stupid mistake. I thought it was just a maid," he said, frustration lacing his words. My heart raced. I was no longer just a maid to him, but a person who had managed to penetrate his carefully constructed world. I leaned closer to the door, straining to hear more, when suddenly Liam appeared beside me, his eyes wide with concern. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, urgency in his voice. I nodded, a shiver running down my spine. My brother, always observant, could sense the change in the household just as I could. It was difficult to determine what this shift meant for our family, but I had to believe it was a step towards justice. "Maybe it's time to tell Mom," Liam suggested, his determination shining through. The thought of Grace knowing the depths of Thomas's cruelty filled me with dread, yet I recognized it was also the opportunity for us to confront the situation as a family. That evening, we gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. I took a deep breath and began sharing my experiences. recounting each humiliating moment I had endured under Thomas's reign. Grace listened intently, her face a portrait of concern and sorrow. Liam stood by my side, nodding in support, and I felt bolstered by their presence. When I finished, Grace reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm so proud of you for speaking out, Eliana," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You deserve so much more than this." With a newfound sense of purpose, we made a plan. Grace would confront Thomas directly, armed with the evidence Liam had captured on his phone. I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Confronting my employer meant stepping into uncharted territory, but I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. The next day, we arranged a time for Grace to meet Thomas in his office. Liam and I stayed close, ready to support her as the tension in the air thickened like a storm cloud. As we approached the door to Thomas's office, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I exchanged a glance with Liam, who offered a reassuring nod. Grace pushed the door open and we stepped inside, the heavy scent of polished wood and expensive cologne enveloping us. Thomas looked up from his desk, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, confusion washing over his features. Grace took a deep breath, her voice steady but forceful. "We need to talk about how you treat Eliana," she said, pointing to me. "Your behavior has been unacceptable, and it's time you understand the impact of your actions." I held my breath, bracing for his reaction. The room was thick with tension, and for a moment, Thomas sat in stunned silence. His expression morphed from surprise to defensiveness. "You don't understand. She's just a maid," he shot back, the disdain evident in his tone. I felt my cheeks flush with indignation. "No, Thomas, she's a human being, deserving of respect," Grace countered, her voice unyielding. Liam stood beside me, his small frame tense with determination, ready to back up our mother. Thomas's facade of indifference began to crack, and for the first time, I saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered, his bravado faltering. I seized the moment, stepping forward to face him directly. "It's not just words, Thomas. It's how you make people feel," I said, the weight of my emotions spilling into the room. "I'm not your servant. I'm a person with hopes and dreams." The silence that followed felt monumental, as if the air itself held its breath. I could see the gears turning in Thomas's mind, the reality of our words beginning to sink in. Liam's phone buzzed silently in his pocket, a reminder of the evidence we carried with us. "You have a choice, Thomas," Grace continued, her tone unwavering. "You can continue this cycle of humiliation, or you can choose to respect those around you. The decision is yours." After what felt like an eternity, Thomas finally spoke. His voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "I didn't realize how much I had hurt you," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine. "I guess I've been blind to my actions." There was a flicker of honesty in his gaze, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the moment where change could begin. We left his office, the atmosphere still heavy but charged with possibility. Grace pulled me into a hug, and I could feel the warmth of her support wrapping around me like a shield. Liam beamed, pride shining through his youthful features. "You did it, Eliana," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You stood up for yourself." My heart swelled with gratitude for my family, but I also felt a cautious optimism toward Thomas. Change would take time, and I was fully aware that this was just the beginning. However, for the first time, I felt a sense of agency over my life. It was a small victory, yet it felt monumental, a step toward a future where dignity could flourish. Together, we had confronted the shadows of humiliation, and the light of hope had begun to emerge. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to embrace it with my family by my side.